Yeah. Or
Inshallah.
yeah. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-aliy al-azim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Today we have a very good discussion. As you see, the late Sheikh Muzaffar was very good in anticipating what type of questions may come to the mind of people who want to know about Shia Islam, whether it be Shia themselves or outsiders. We already discussed about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about his attributes. We talked about his unity, his justice. Now we are discussing taklif, obligation. Aqidatuna fi taklif. What is our belief about obligation? Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes some obligations, some legislations, what to do, what not to do, what's better to do, what's better not to do, what are the conditions for taklif, what is the purpose of taklif. If we know this, then we can better appreciate these duties and responsibilities that we have in Islam. نعتقد أنه تعالى لا يكلف عباده إلا بعد إقامة الحجة عليهم. The very first thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not obligate his servants unless he has already made a proof available for them. Our ulama say in Usul al-Fiqh, قُبْحُ الْعِقَابِ بِلَا بَيَانٍ. Unless something is well explained, you cannot expect. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this principle in his treatment of human beings, that unless he makes things clear for them, he doesn't expect from them to behave. Of course, what is important is that this information should be available. If I don't go and look for it, if I don't search for it, if I close my eyes and ears and say I don't know, no, that's another issue. But the knowledge should be available. It should be accessible. Means with ordinary amount of efforts, you should be able to find. Even you don't need to go to another planet to find it. How much efforts you make in your other areas of life, at least make the same in religion. If you need, for example, to qualify for a job, if you need, a medicine, a treatment, how much you go around to find information, how much you study. So at least do the same for your religion. And if you don't find it, then you can say, oh Allah, I looked everywhere, I didn't find the answer. But before you make efforts, it's not acceptable. So, لا يكلف عباده إلا بعد إقامة الحجة عليهم. He would not command, he would not obligate his servants unless after he establishes hujjah, argument, proof, demonstration for them. ولا يكلفهم. Number 2. So the first principle was about knowledge. Knowledge is a condition. Number 2, power, qadra, ability. لا يكلفهم إلا ما يسعهم ما يقدرون عليه وما يطيقونه وما يعلمون. Allah would not ask them to do anything unless that is something that they are capable of. They can do it. It's within their power. And they know. لأنه من الظلم تكليف العاجز والجاهل غير المقصر في التعليم. because it is an act of injustice to ask someone who is not capable, who is ajiz. Ajiz means is not capable, is incompetent. If someone has, for example, no ability to walk, we cannot ask him to walk or to run. Or human beings cannot fly, by themselves. We cannot ask them, to fly. Or ask them not to eat, not to drink, for a month, for example, day and night, not to eat, not to drink for 30 days. No. Yes, not to drink and eat during the day, it's possible. And even if someone is ill, we say, okay, if you are ill and this is harmful for you, don't do it. So legislations are made according to the capacity of the average. And even if someone cannot do as average, they can be exempted, because Allah would never obligate something to someone who cannot do it. لأنه من الظلم تكليف العاجز, because it's an act of injustice to impose taklif, to do obligation on someone who is not capable. والجاهل غير المقصر في التعليم, and also someone who is ignorant, but not ignorant because of his own taqsir. Because as you know, we have two types of jahil. Jahil qasir, jahil muqassir. Qasir is the one who doesn't know but also couldn't know. Qasir, he doesn't have access. Muqassir is guilty, means someone who has access, who has ability, but didn't make due efforts. This is called muqassir. So we have two types of jahil. Jahil qasir is excused, means morally is not responsible. Maybe he has some legal responsibilities, for example, but morally would not be responsible and would not be punished if he had no way to know it. But muqassir is guilty because he has not tried. So taklif al-ajiz is zulm, taklif al-jahil ghayr al-muqassir fi al-ta'lim, the ignorant one who has not done any taqsir in learning and in education, is also zulm. أما الجاهل المقصر في معرفة الأحكام والتكاليف. But if someone is muqassir in knowing rulings and obligations, this person is not excused. هو مسؤول عند الله, he has to answer. He is responsible and has to be answerable. ومعاقب على تقصيره, and would be punished for his taqsir, means for his guilt in learning. There is hadith that on the day of judgment some people would be asked, why you didn't practice? Halla amilta. They would say, we didn't know. They think not knowing is an excuse. Then we will be asked, Halla ta'allamta. Why you didn't learn? Not to know is not an excuse. If you don't know and you couldn't have known, yes, this is an excuse. Otherwise, no. فَهُوَ مَسْئُولٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Jahil muqassir is mas'ul, means will be answerable, has to be answerable, accountable, because this is something that he could know. وَمُعَاقَبٌ عَلَى تَقْصِيرِهِ, and deserves punishment. Of course, maybe Allah would forgive, but that's another thing. This person deserves guilt, is guilty and deserves blame and punishment. as يجب على كل إنسان أن يتعلم ما يحتاج إليه من الأحكام الشرعية. Because every human being must learn what he needs to know. Those, in Risala there are thousands of mas'ala. You don't need to know all of them. But those things which are applicable to you, you are mubtala bih, you should know. ونعتقد أنه تعالى لا بد أن يكلف عباده ويسن لهم الشرائع وَمَا فِيهِ صَلَاحُهُمْ وَخَيْرُهُمْ. So far we talked about conditions of taklif, and we focus on two conditions: knowledge and power. In this paragraph we want to say why Allah should make these obligations. What is the philosophy behind these obligations? Certainly He doesn't need our actions. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes these obligations? And this is actually common in all religious traditions that believe in God, that they have certain duties, certain responsibilities. Even in Christianity, that they don't have Sharia, unlike Judaism and Islam, but still they have canon law. They have lots of obligations, responsibilities, and they have also moral responsibilities. So what is the philosophy? We believe that Allah the Almighty لا بد أن يكلف عباده ويسن لهم الشرائع, should make obligations for His servants and legislate for them codes of law, shara'. وَمَا فِيهِ صَلَاحُهُمْ وَخَيْرُهُمْ, something in which their interest and their goodness is. God should tell them, inform them, do this, don't do this. Why? Because this is a way to guide them, to let them know their interests, what is harmful, what is useful. لِيَدُلَّهُمْ عَلَى طُرُقِ الْخَيْرِ وَالسَّعَادَةِ الدَّائِمَةِ. This is a favor of Allah. This is a lot from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He can then tell them and show them the path for goodness and for eternal felicity and happiness. وَيُرْشِدَهُمْ إِلَى مَا فِيهِ الصَّلَاحِ, then Allah can show them to what has their interest in it. وَيَزْجُرَهُمْ عَمَّا فِيهِ الْفَسَادُ وَالضَّرَرُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَسُوءُ عَاقِبَتِهِمْ, and to stop them, prohibit them. Zajr means to stop, to prohibit. What is فيه الفساد, in which there is corruption, there is harm, there is سوء عاقبة, end of bad end for them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, like a doctor, like a teacher, like a mentor, tells us what is useful for us, what is not useful for us. So it's out of His favor for us that He gives these instructions. Had we ourselves had enough of knowledge, we would have known ourselves these takalif. But because we don't have that much knowledge, experience, even in dunya we don't know enough, let alone to know what in dunya has certain impacts in the akhirah. So we need this guidance. وَإِنْ عَلِمَ أَنَّهُمْ لَا يُطِيعُونَهُ, even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that sometimes people disobey, but He should inform them. There are people that would listen, would appreciate. At least he does his job. You know, as a doctor, as a teacher, as a, charitable person, what is your responsibility? To offer. If people appreciate or not appreciate, that would not affect the beauty of your work, because you have offered. لأن ذلك لطف ورحمة بعباده. This guidance that Allah provides about what is harmful, what is useful, is lutfun, is a grace, is a favor, ورحمة, mercy for His servants. وهم يجهلون أكثر مصالحهم, while they don't know themselves most of their masalih. Yes, we know some of the things. For example, we know the basics of akhlaq, as we have been saying. We know theft is bad, beating, for example, innocent people is bad, breaking our promise, but we know these basic things, but there are many things that we don't know. يجهلون أكثر مصالحهم وطرقها في الدنيا والآخرة. Also they don't know the path to get to their interest in dunya or to get to their interest in akhirah. After few basic principles, the rest they don't know. ويجهلون الكثير مما يعود عليهم بالضرر والخسران. And they don't know many of the things that would bring them harm and loss. والله تعالى هو الرحمن الرحيم بنفس ذاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by his essence is Rahman and Rahim. He has inclusive mercy and additional mercy. Inclusive mercy for everything, Rahmati wasa'at kulla shay, and a special mercy, additional mercy for mu'mineen. بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم. وهو من كماله المطلق. And this is originating from his absolute perfection. الذي هو عين ذاته. This is the same as his essence. ويستحيل أن ينفك عنه, and cannot be separated from God. So if someone says, why God created us, why God sent us religions and prophets, why God provided us with Sharia, this is the answer. We say, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be merciful, and then out of his mercy to provide us with guidance is essential. You don't ask a person who is very, very generous why you are generous, why you are giving. You don't ask, for example, teacher who cannot see ignorance, why you are teaching. He loves to teach essentially. He is not interested in anything other than just letting this knowledge go out. Or a doctor wants to help people with his medicine and his experience. A good doctor, a good nurse cannot see people ill. It's like sugar is sweet. If you ask sugar, why are you sweet? This is my essence. Salt is salty. Why? It's essence. ولا يرفع هذا اللطف وهذه الرحمة أن يكون العباد متمردين على طاعته غير مناقضين إلى أوامره والنواهي. It should be منقادين, not مناقضين. And it would not remove this favor and grace of Allah and mercy of Allah if servants, people are disobedient, mutamarrid, they rebel, they don't obey him, they don't have inqiyad. Munqad means someone who is obedient. Ghayru munqadin means they don't listen to his commands and prohibitions. Okay, he does his job. So now we know the philosophy of taklif, and we know what are the conditions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala observed. In particular, we focus on two things, qudra and knowledge. Of course, there are others. For example, there should not be ikrah. If someone is under pressure, his life or life of dear ones, for example, is threatened, then there would be no taklif. If someone is not baligh, has not reached the age of puberty, again there is no taklif. But the main things are knowledge and power. Now we go into a very important discussion. عقيدتنا في القضاء والقدر. How much time we have, Brother Hussein?
About 25 minutes.
Okay. This issue is very important, and as I told you, because the issue of adl is related to many issues like qaza and qadar, Shia have chosen this as one of their principles. So you see, the idea of qaza and qadar is mentioned here because we are talking about Allah's justice, and taklif is part of it. Qada and qadar is also closely related to the issue of divine justice plus his attributes and Tawhid al-Sifati and Af'ali. Everything is an act of God. خب ذهب قوم وهم المجبرة إلى أنه تعالى هو الفاعل لأفعال المخلوقين. Some people, and they are called mujabbira. Mujabbira are those who believe in jabr, in determinism, in the sense that we don't have choice. Our actions are created and decided, or at least decided in eternity. We have no role. We are just a subject for these actions. God does things in us. We have no role except to be the subject. So these people who believe in determinism, they have this opinion that Allah the Almighty huwa al-fa'ilu la'af'al al-makhluqin. He is the doer of the actions of creatures. He does our salat and fasting, or na'uzu billah, lying and killing, and so on and so forth. Our actions are His actions, are done by Him. فَيَكُونُ قَدْ أَجْبَرَ النَّاسِ عَلَى فِعْلِ الْمَعَاصِي. If you believe in this, the outcome is that He has forced people to do sins, to commit sins. وَهُوَ مَعَ ذَلِكَ يُعَذِّبُهُمْ عَلَيْهَا, and still He punishes them. وَأَجْبَرَهُمْ عَلَى فِعْلِ الطَّاعَاتِ, and He has also forced them for acts of obedience. وَمَعَ ذَلِكَ يُثِيبُهُمْ عَلَيْهَا, and still He rewards them. Neither sins nor hasanat are done by people. Why you punish those who have committed sin and reward those who have done good things? لأنهم يقولون أن أفعالهم في الحقيقة أفعاله. They say actions of creatures, especially we are talking about human beings, people, are the actions of God. وإنما تنسب إليهم على سبيل التجوز. We only attribute these actions to them in a metaphoric sense. Me and you are not talking, walking, speaking, doing this, doing that. This is just on the surface. We are like puppets. He does everything. لأنهم محلها. Why it is right to still attribute it to people in a metaphoric sense? Because there must be a way to justify this. I cannot attribute someone else's action to someone else. If you do something, I cannot attribute it to myself. So why we attribute action of God to myself or to you? Because God does those things in us. So if He uses my hands and my legs and my eyes and my tongue for His actions, I am mahal, I am the subject, I'm the place in which He is creating these actions. So because of that, we attribute it to ourselves. According to them, there is no really causality in this world. We are nothing. ومرجع ذلك إلى إنكار السببية الطبيعية بين الأشياء. This is going back, so it can be reduced. It would lead to this consequence that there would be no natural causality between things. This is an idea that in Western theology they call it occasionalism. Occasionalism is the idea that, for example, if there is fire and then something is burnt, they say there is no connection between fire and burning. Just one of them happened after the other. Actually, Ash'arites also in Islam had this idea. They used to say, Adatullah jarat. This is the habit of Allah. that he creates fire and then he creates burning of the wood, but there is no connection between them. David Hume also denied causality, but not for religious reasons. In any case, these people believe in a kind of occasionalism. They deny causality, and they say إنه تعالى هو السبب الحقيقي لا سبب سواه. He is the real cause and no cause other than him exists. Everything is action of God. So they try to emphasize on Tawhid Af'ali, but unfortunately they missed the whole point about justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and about human freedom, and about human responsibility. So they try to fix something, but they damage another thing. وَقَدْ أَنْكَرُوا السَّبَبِيَّةَ الطَّبِيعِيَّةَ بَيْنَ الْأَشْيَاءِ. The reason they have denied natural causality between things is الظن أن ذلك هو مقتضى كونه تعالى هو الخالق الذي لا شريك له. Because they thought, if we want to believe that God is the creator of everything and there is no partner for him, so every action must be his action and no one else. They didn't know that we can have hierarchy of agents. Something can be an action of God and at the same time an action of an angel, at the same time angel of the archangel. For example, like death. Quran says, Allahu yatawaffa al-anfusa hina mawtaha. So this is an action of God to take the life, to take the spirit. Also the Quran says, قُلْ يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ مَلَكُ الْمَوْتِ الَّذِي وُكِّلَ بِكُمْ. The angel of death who is commissioned would take your soul or life. Also the Quran says, الَّذِي تَوَفَّتْهُ رُسُلُنَا. The angels of death would take the soul. This is not any contradiction. God, angel of death, under him other angels. Like for example, a king says, we built this city. Then the prime minister says, we built this city. The minister says, we built this city. The governor of that province or county says, we made this city. The company that made that city says, we made this city. There's a hierarchy. They didn't know this. So they thought, because Allah is the creator, everything must be his creation. And no one else can do anything, can have any role. Sheikh Muzaffar says, وَمَنْ يَقُولُ بِهَذِهِ الْمَقَالَةِ. Whoever says such opinion, holds such opinion, فَقَدْ نَسَبَ الظُّلْمَ إِلَيْهِ تَعَالَى عَنْ ذَلِكَ, has attributed injustice to God. And may God be glorified with respect to such injustice. Okay, this is the idea of Jabr. Quite opposite to this, 180-degree opposite to this, is the idea of Mufawwidha, those who believe in Tafwid. These people believe that God, when it comes to voluntary actions, has delegated everything to us and has no role anymore. God is 100% retired from voluntary action. Yes, still he runs the plants and planets and stars and clouds and so on and so forth. But when it comes to human voluntary action, has no role. وَذَهَبَ قَوْمٌ آخَرُونَ وَهُمُ الْمُفَوِّضَةِ. Another group which are called Mufawwidha, those who believe in Tafwid, mean to delegate all the power and authority to human beings. They have taken this position that Allah has فَوَّضَ الْأَفْعَالِ. He has delegated all the actions to people. وَرَفَعَ قُدْرَتَهُ وَقَضَاءَهُ وَتَقْدِيرَهُ عَنْهَا. And he has removed his own power and decree and measure from these actions. When it comes to human actions which are voluntary, not for example, my body is growing or my hair is growing, these are not voluntary actions. But anything which is voluntary, which is within the realm of morality, is delegated to us. باعتبار أن نسبة الأفعال إليه تعالى تستلزم نسبة النقص إليه. The reason they have gone to this position is because they thought if we say human actions are God's actions, then it would create problem. Because then we are attributing some deficiency to God. How can we say God kills, na'uzu billah? God, I don't know, corrupts. God gives, bribery. God is, for example, doing injustice. Because human beings may do these things. They shed blood, they do mischief, as the angel said. So in order not to attribute these to God, they said God has no role in this realm. This is left to us. وَأَنَّ لِلْمَوْجُودَاتِ أَسْبَابَهَا الْخَاصَّةِ. They had the idea that for these things that exist, there are their own causes. وَإِنْ انْتَهَتْ كُلُّهَا إِلَى مُسَبِّبِ الْأَسْبَابِ وَالسَّبَبِ الْأَوَّلِ وَهُوَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. Yes, in the end, they all go back to God, but God has given certain things authority, full authority and independence. Okay, this idea is also wrong. The first group tried to preserve Tawheed Af'ali, they damaged justice of God. These people tried to keep justice of God, they damaged Tawheed Af'ali, and they made God retired, and they given some kind of role to others independent from God, which becomes shirk. وَمَنْ يَقُولُ بِهَذِهِ الْمَقَالَةِ. Whoever says this opinion, فَقَدْ أَخْرَجَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى مِنْ سُلْطَانِهِ, has removed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from his authority, sovereignty, kingdom, وَأَشْرَكَ غَيْرَهُ مَعَهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ, and has made others share with God in creation, means has associated creatorship to others. This is shirk. What is the Shia idea? I just say one paragraph. If we don't have enough time. واعتقادنا في ذلك تبع لما جاء عن أئمتنا الأطهار. Our belief in this issue follows the idea that we have received from our Imams, and that is al-amru bayna al-amrayn. As you know, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, لا جبر ولا تفويض ولكن أمر بين أمرين. Neither determinism nor delegation, something in between. Neither we say that God has done everything and we have no role, nor we say we do everything and God has no role. He has a role, we have also a role. We work under him, but we have to accept responsibility for our actions because he has given us freedom. So, اعتقادنا في ذلك, our belief in this, follows the idea that has come from our Imams, which is al-amr bayn al-amrayn. وَالطَّرِيقِ الْوَسَطِ بَيْنَ الْقَوْلَيْنِ. وَالطَّرِيقُ الْوَسَطِ بَيْنَ, the middle path, the middle way. الذي كان يعجز عن فهمه أمثال أولئك المجادلين من أهل الكلام. Something that these people who were debating from متكلمين, they were not able to understand. ففرط منهم قوم وأفرط آخرون. Therefore they have gone to extremes. Some have gone to this side of extreme, have too much emphasis, for example, on unity of God in action, and some people have gone to the other side of the extreme. They didn't emphasize on unity of God, but they emphasize more on justice. So there is ifrat and tafrit, means either they have done too much or too little. وَلَمْ يَكْتَشِفْهُ الْعِلْمُ وَالْفَلْسَفَةِ إِلَّا بَعْدَ عِدَّةِ قُرُونٍ. This idea was not known for scientists and philosophers except after some centuries became very clear. وَلَيْسَ مِنَ الْغَرِيبِ مِمَّنْ لَمْ يَطَّلِعْ عَلَى حِكْمَةِ الْأَئِمَّةِ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامُ وَأَقْوَالِهِمْ أن يحسب أن هذا القول وهو الأمر بين الأمرين من مكتشفات بعض فلاسفة الغرب المتأخرين. It is not surprising that some people who are not familiar with the wisdom that we have received from Imams and they are not familiar with the words of Imam, to think that this idea of Ambain Amrain is something that some recent Western philosophers have discovered. But the reality is that our Imams, before 10 centuries before, these people have reached this position. Not, for example, philosophers of 16th, 17th century. فقد قال إمامنا الصادق لبيان الطريق الوسط كلمته المشهورة. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam has said his famous word, لا جبر ولا تفويض ولكن أمر بين أمرين. Neither determinism nor delegation, something in between. I think for tonight is enough. If there are questions we can answer, and inshallah we continue this discussion tomorrow. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sheikh, for a very informative 8th lecture.
Alhamdulillah.
I think we have time for one question relating to your topic today. The question is, we say that everything is the action of God and that لا مؤثر في الوجود إلا الله.
Yes.
But we talk about jihad al-nafs. Is jihad al-nafs the action of God or our action? Is our determination our action or the action of God? Does our determination have an effect on the world? If so, how can we say that لا مؤثر في الوجود إلا الله?
Yes. It is our action and Allah's action. And when we say لا مؤثر في الوجود إلا الله, means لا مؤثر في الوجود مستقلاً. There is no one who can have any influence, any impact independently except God. But under God, there are many agents. Angels are active, human beings are active, natural factors are active, but not independent from God. Under Him, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah,
we have time for one more.
Yes.
Do we have the right to ask about the logic behind Islamic laws, or is that a form of questioning God?
Yes, very good question. Yes, we can ask about the logic, but we should also understand our limits. The general logic is clear, is what we said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge about what is our maslahah, our interest, what is harmful, and out of His love for us, He has communicated that knowledge of our maslahah and our harm to us. And also, in order to encourage us to work for our maslahah and avoid mafsada, He Himself has taken a role. You know, like for example, if someone loves me a lot and I feel very much in debt to him, He uses His love to encourage me to do good thing. Still, it's good for me. Like my father, my mother, a good friend, a good, I don't know, teacher, they may use my sense of respect for them as a way to give me more encouragement. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has involved Himself and said, do this, don't do that, just to make sure that we do what is to our own maslahah. And if we listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would reach our maslahah. So we know this is the whole philosophy about Sharia. Then we know when the maslahah is something without which we cannot reach happiness, it becomes wajib. If it is lower than that, that maslahah becomes mustahab. If mafsada, harm, is too much with which we cannot reach sa'ada, becomes haram. If it is lower than that, it's makruh. If maslahah and mafsada are almost equal or neutral, we call them mubah. Of course, there are, in my understanding, very rare cases that can be really zero balance, but something that is almost zero. But when it comes to details, we know few principles. For example, we know that anything which is harmful to our health is bad. Anything which is harmful to human relations is bad. Anything which is, for example, causing suspicion, division is bad. Anything which affects our intelligence, our intellect is bad. Modesty is good. Respecting, property of others. We know also these things. But when it goes to many more complicated issues, then we don't have enough of information to be able to understand why, for example, khums is 20%. How can I understand why it is not 19% or 21%? Why we should say 17 rak'ah salat every day, not 16 or 18? Here we cannot understand by our own intellect. Actually, in philosophy we say intellect does not work in particular things. Al-juz'iyyu la yakunu kasiban wa la muktasaba. When it comes to very particular things, you have to understand it through perception or through mystical experiences, through intuition, or someone should tell you. One problem in medieval ages was they wanted to understand everything by philosophy and theology. For example, Ayatollah Mutahari says in one of his books, there was a discussion among them, a horse, how many teeth a horse has. And they were disagreeing, they were giving different figures, and they were arguing for that. And someone said, let's go and count. We can go and count the teeth of the horse. So with philosophy, you cannot understand whether we have to say 17 rak'ah or 18 rak'ah or 16 rak'ah. With philosophy, you cannot understand many details. But what is important? That we understand that Allah has the knowledge and mercy. He tells us what is good for us. He doesn't have any need. And we also understand some basic things. The rest, we trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We trust the person who speaks on behalf of Allah. Mukhbar as-Sadiq means Rasulullah, who was truthful and was educated by Allah. And then Imams, and then those who are familiar with the teachings of Imams.